uh, I was given a prospect of a of a recurrence within the next 5 years, and so I was struggling with all of that, and I stumbled upon some of the Buddhist writing, and this notion of living in the moment. I have to say, initially, and for the next probably decade or so, it didn't work very well for me, Ken, because my understanding at the time of what it meant to live in the moment meant that somehow, uh, in spite of my catastrophic fears about what might happen, I was supposed to be comfortable and satisfied and happy, for lack of a better word, with the present moment. And I have to tell you, there were many days and many moments where I wasn't particularly happy. And it wasn't until years later, through the help of friends and others and experiences, that I started reading deeper into things. Ran across the work of Pema Chodron. I don't know if you've read any of Pema Chodron, but one of the great things about Pema's writing and speaking is her own description of reaching crises in her life, and understanding that, hey, it's okay if you feel like shit, you feel like shit. That's okay. That's part of present mindedness, is to accept that there are bad days and there are good days. But how you approach that is what makes or doesn't that experience. And if I'm able not to let that get connected to feelings of guilt or regret or remorse, or if I'm able not to have that connect to catastrophizing future fears, then that present moment and the awareness of that present moment of not feeling particularly good is limited to that moment. And the same could be applied to when things are going well. After a while, I've come to understand that even the moments that are the very best are just to be appreciated for what they are, and without a promise that the next moment or the next moment is going to be better or not better. In fact, this phenomenon of, I think it's called hedonic adaptation, that once we get something good in our lives, we're not satisfied with that. We want the next thing to be even better, and to be even better and even better. And God forbid that it should be taken away from us, because we've adapted to that hedonistic feeling, that dopamine surge. And should someone try to take that away from us, then we're really miserable. So I began to realize that this notion of living in the moment in the popular culture that I'm preparing you for is not fully understood. And what I do like about your talk is that you quickly move from talking about living in the moment to present mindedness. And there's a subtle difference there, at least in how people interpret that, if you understand. I think when people hear, I'm going to live in the moment, their immediate thought is, I'm living in the moment looking for happiness, looking for gratification. Whereas present mindedness is a little more agnostic and neutral. It just says, acknowledge the present. Acknowledge the present for what it is. You follow my distinction? Yeah, and some of the elements of what is in the present moment are good and can be enjoyed, and sometimes what is in the present moment is not, but it's not going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And I think what I learned from that experience about melanoma was that when people told me, "Oh, the way you get through this, Eric, none of us is guaranteed life, is just live in the present moment." And I took from that this notion, oh, I guess what I'm supposed to do then is to figure out what's good about every present moment. And Pema reminds us that no, every present moment is not necessarily pleasant and harmonious and dopamine rich. I love her metaphor about the woman being pursued by tigers. If you recall that story, that there's a woman being pursued by a tiger. Do you know this story? And she's running from the tiger who's going to eat her, and she comes to the edge of a cliff, and the lion is coming up on her, and so she sees there's a vine hanging from the cliff, so she climbs down the vine, and the tiger is above her looking down on the vine, and she looks down at the bottom of the cliff where the vine is down, and there's another tiger at the bottom of the cliff. And at that point, a mouse comes out of a small hole and begins to nibble at the vine. And she notices in front of her a strawberry. And she plucks, and she says, and Pema says in the story, a lion above, a lion below, a mouse chewing at the vine, which could go anytime. And she plucks the strawberry and eats it. And that's the metaphor of life, is it not? I mean, life begins, life ends. You don't know when the vine is going to break. Hey, there's a strawberry. Eat the strawberry. Present-mindedness. So that's one comment I would make in the beginning, is this transition that you make in the talk, if you could go back to it briefly, where you start by talking about living in the moment, but not allow people to mistake that for a sense that, oh, I'm supposed to make the moment into something that it isn't. I'm supposed to make the moment into something pleasant or happy or something. Walt Pyatt right now, who's the current director of the Army staff, one of the most senior officers in the Army, is a very strong proponent of present-mindedness. He credits present-mindedness and mindfulness with having gotten him through, many combat deployments and difficult times. He is working with Amishi Jha, I may have mentioned to you, a neuroscientist at the University of Miami, who is a great inspiration for me, and is written, and who herself, if you've not seen her videos, I've done a couple of them with her on Google and elsewhere. She with the help of Walt, has gone into the Army to teach senior Army leaders about the importance of present-mindedness. The reason I bring that up is that a lot of people, I was at the War College up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, the Army War College yesterday, talking and leading a mindfulness exercise at the beginning of my class. And I told the class, look, this is associated in so many people's minds with sort of smoke and mirrors and, earthy, crunchy stuff. But this is real. This is also real neuroscience. And this is how our minds operate. And this sixth sense that we have of awareness is a phenomenon that might distinguish us as humans and is protective of us. It helps us to have a much more meaningful life. And Amishi Jha's work, is exactly on that. She's teaching senior leaders that her science and her experimentation at the University of Miami has shown objective improvement in the level of attentiveness, and the level of memory access when one has a practice of present-mindedness and meditation, mindfulness meditation. You can objectively measure what that is, so that when you're with a patient, for example, and the patient often complain that, I'm talking with my doctor and it's very clear that he or she is somewhere else. They're not with me now. It's because we're not being present-minded with them. So how do we begin that unique session with the patient, having focused our attention on the present moment and them, and not worrying about that last patient you saw and whether you got the labs right, or whether their drug level is appropriate, or the next patient you're going to see, and whether you're on track to end the clinic in time so you can take your son to his baseball practice or your daughter to her dance recital. I mean, that is what present-mindedness is about in the real world that we're facing. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.